The Port Washington Peninsula was not entirely a playground of privilege. The southwestern edge was devoted to the sand mines, which produced sand that became the concrete for the sidewalks and skyscrapers in New York City. Just below the topsoil, Port Washington rests on hundreds of feet of coarse sand, deposited thousands of years ago by the movement of ancient glaciers. Workers in Port Washington sorted the sand from the gravel and loaded it all into train cars and barges along Hempstead Bay, which took it to construction sites all over New York.
The sand we got in the Port Washington sandbanks is just fantastic. It has life in it. It's the best sand you can get for making concrete. Just the right combination of coarse and fine grains. You go to the beach and you take that sand, and if you make concrete out of that, it will fall apart because there's no life in it.
Most of the sand workers were Italian and Polish immigrants. They worked 12-hour days, 6 days per week for $1.50 per day, about $45 in today's money. The sand miners lived in company barracks that housed up to 800 people, or in shacks owned by local bosses. Some of the workers returned to Europe after a few years, but those who stayed brought their wives over and started families in houses they rented from the sand companies. The sand mines were open year-round in rain and snow, although demand for sand was reduced in the winter. The winter of 1904 was really slow, but one local boss, James Marino, kept the mine open and all the men employed by contracting them to build a stone mansion for his family out of Port Washington concrete. The millionaires lived just a couple of miles away, along the dramatic shorelines at the tip of the peninsula. There, old money families with more pretensions than actual cash mingled with socialites who had inherited fortunes in the tens of millions. In 1910, the biggest names included William Guggenheim, who lived on 150 acres named Waterside Farm, and Howard Gould, who owned a literal castle. It was a replica of Kilkenny Castle in Ireland, commissioned for Howard's new wife, an actress named Catherine Clemens. Howard even sent the architect to Ireland to study the castle in person. But when the architect came back, his plans fell short of Catherine's expectations. She wanted 200 rooms and a moat, but the architect was designing something closer to an ordinary mansion. Howard let the project move forward anyway, since he could always use the finished 100,000 square foot limestone castle as a horse stable, and promptly commissioned a second building that was more to his wife's taste, hopefully, Hempstead House. Hempstead House was a Tudor-style mansion with crenellated towers and gargoyles, and by the time it was finished, the marriage was over. South of the millionaires and east of the sand mines, Port Washington's middle class clustered around the train stations, in housing developments that seemed to be popping up daily. When Nick Carraway moves to Long Island in The Great Gatsby, he admits that his house was an eyesore, but on the upside, he had a view of the water, a partial view of his neighbor's lawn, and the consoling proximity of millionaires, all for $80 a month. F. Scott Fitzgerald wasn't just being silly. Proximity to millionaires was an actual thing that the property developers advertised.
Especially appealing to the businessman who, having offices in Manhattan, is desirous of enjoying the evening at home midst enjoyment of pure country air and not being too far away from his office. This ideal spot, Willowdale Terrace, is just what sensibly conservative people would enjoy. Only 32 minutes to Herald Square. Think of it. And the beauty of it is multiplied by its environment, where homes of millionaires abound and adorn this section. We have good reason, therefore, to state that Willowdale Terrace makes the ideal home for the middleman as well.
The middleman may have liked living near the millionaires, but the millionaires did not like living next to him.